Look, it's no secret that we went through some pretty tough times. You go back to 2017, 18, 19, and we had to sort of do things differently, and we've talked a bit about that. 95% of our business is export and always has been. And there wouldn't be a day go by where we don't have some issue we're dealing with in some corner of the world somewhere. What is that breakthrough technology? What is the next protein or amino acid that exists in milk that we haven't yet developed?
Kia ora, welcome to Shared Lunch, brought to you by Sharesies. I'm Helen Mattison. Today we look at one of New Zealand's largest companies, dairy co-op Fonterra. And in a moment I'll be going upstairs to speak with CEO Miles Hurrell. But before we get started, here's some important information.
Investing involves risk. You might lose the money you start with. We recommend talking to a licensed financial advisor. We also recommend reading product disclosure documents before deciding to invest. Everything you're about to see and hear is current at the time of recording.
Welcome, Miles. Thank you for having us at HQ here with Fonterra in Auckland.
Our pleasure. Nice to have you here, Helen.
Let's start at the beginning. I know you've been with Fonterra, I think, nearly 25 years. Is that right?
November 6, 2000, yeah.
You've had a number of roles, it would be fair to say, in that time, which you'd expect. I think you've even been in Russia and Africa, all sorts of exotic places. Tell us a little bit about that journey to where you are today, and 2018 is when you took the helm.
Yeah, well, it's been varied. As you say, I've lived in a few places around the globe, heap of experience and exciting times. A few times that I remember fondly that have been a bit hairy at times as well, when you get into some places that you may not wish to be in again. But that said, the experience that's given me being offshore with our customers, some of our key customers, some of our key markets, has been invaluable for me coming back to New Zealand in 2014, and was fortunate enough to sort of lead up the farm source business as it was, and getting closely engaged with our farmer shareholders, and ultimately given me the opportunity, I think, in 2018 to step into this role. So yeah, I mean, it's been a great career. As you say, 25 years come this November.
So if we go back even further, were you brought up on a farm, or did you have an inkling that you would be the CEO of Fonterra one day?
No, far from it. No, I certainly wasn't born up in rural New Zealand. I was brought up in Christchurch, and got introduced to the dairy industry, as I say, sort of late 90s, and moved across in the year 2000. So, and my involvement with farming at that point was limited to the role you should expect in a corporate role within the dairy industry. And it wasn't, as I say, until 2014 where I got back and was heavily involved in that shareholder interface. Of course, being in a cooperative, plenty of times, certainly those times when you're offshore, where you come back to New Zealand for workshops or meetings, as what it may be. And there were opportunities at that point in time to go and spend some time on farm, and I enjoyed those times actually, and I have fond memories and still keep in touch with some of those farmers now that actually hosted me at those times. And so that was, I guess, my first foray into farming. But how can you grow up in New Zealand without knowing the impact that rural New Zealand has on the economy anyway? So that was my involvement.
It's been quite a journey though, hasn't it? I mean, Fonterra today in 2025 is probably quite a different company to what you knew right through that tenure, I imagine. And if we look at today, it feels like the change is more to a business-to-business relationship in terms of your customers. If we look at that compared to where it was, it had more consumer focus in some ways, export obviously always. How would you describe that transition?
Yeah, but even if I go back to my early days in the industry, you have to remember that New Zealand went through significant milk growth. The early part of the 2000s, 2010, New Zealand was growing significant milk through that period. And so, I was involved at a time where, the phrase was any sale was a good sale. And by that, what we meant was we had so much milk coming at us in the international market. Yeah. We were out there finding new homes for this milk all the time. Gosh. And of course, that meant you were in all channels, you're in all categories, you're in all markets. Because, as I say, every sale was a good sale. Now you're in a situation where milk is no longer in that growth phase, and so therefore you can be a bit more selective around who you play with, where you play, what categories and which channels, which has also brought about the change in our recent strategy around we're going to be more focused to the point you say around business to business, because we believe that's where our future lies. It's where our competitive advantage has always been. We've also had to be beyond that when you think about that significant milk growth through those early part of the 2000s. So, it's evolving with both the dynamics of the company, the dynamics of the industry you play in, some of the geopolitical situation that we see ourselves in. If you're not focused and targeted around where you think you're going to have the advantage, you run the risk of being running amok, if you like. And so from our perspective, all those things have played into our new strategy, which we launched late last year.
Thinking of geopolitical, Donald Trump, now the president of the US, has talked a lot about tariffs. Obviously we do, and I think Fonterra sends product to the US. Any idea what impact that might have, or is it too early?
Well, he's been vocal, I think, right through his campaign around what he's going to do with tariffs. And you've seen that play out recently with Canada and Mexico and China. Some of the numbers that he's talked about differ from what he talked about in the election campaign. That said, we always expected there would be some changes to what we've probably experienced in the past few years. So making sure you understand and be prepared for that is what we've been focused on as an organisation. But also you've got to go back and realise 95% of our business is export and always has been.
Yeah.
And there wouldn't be a day go by where we don't have some issue we're dealing with in some corner of the world somewhere. And so while this is on a larger scale than what we've ever seen probably for quite some time, we know how to deal with these things. And so it's about being diversified in how you go to market, diversified in your customer relationships globally, making sure you're agile enough, you've got a strong balance sheet to withstand things that may be thrown at you. So not a great outcome in what he talks about around tariffs. Ultimately, our perspective is that the American consumer is probably going to be the loser in all of this. The costs will clearly be passed on, and already I've seen that play out in the last couple of days with Canada and Mexico. So not ideal. If everyone's in the same boat, I mean, it doesn't change our position globally, but it's certainly something that we need to think about and be concerned about as we head into, I think, a different world era than what we've been in previously.
Thinking of markets, I know China has always been, I think, your largest. We've just talked about the US, but there must be other opportunities, Southeast Asia. What would you say are the emerging markets and your core markets at the moment?
Yeah, well, China sort of speaks for itself, and it's been roughly a third of our book for quite some time, and that comes and goes a little bit, and the economy hasn't been great there the last couple of years, but we're seeing that re-emerge, and so again, talk about that, roughly a third of our book. We see free trade agreement with the likes of the United Kingdom starting to really sort of come into its own, and we're making some great progress there. North America, we've talked about that, but that is a good market for us. But remember, the large developed economies of Europe, North America, India are very protected when it comes to dairy access, and we don't get free access to these countries from a commodity perspective. So it means we've got to think differently anyway, and we have done for quite some time. So it's around what is the nutritional value of the products we're trying to send in there? What are the customer relationships where they're wanting something unique that we have, whether it be from an intellectual property, from a nutrition perspective, or even from the way we farm. And so bringing those three things together around and using that to access markets outside of the commodity sphere. But then you talk about Southeast Asia. I mean, it's our backyard. We see huge prospects through there and continue to see prospects. We've been in those markets again for a number of years, and they don't get a lot of mention. No. I think places like Vietnam, it's one of the largest growth stories for us in the last couple of years. There's 100 odd million people in Vietnam. People sort of lose sight of that, and it's just around the corner. From our perspective.
Have they got a rising birth rate still, unlike, say, the West?
More than the West, but certainly slowed down from what you would have seen sort of in the past decade. So not China stats or Japan or the West, but not also the growth rates that you see in the likes of Africa, where you're still seeing significant growth. Middle East and Africa, birth rates are still continuing to grow at significant rates. So slowing down from where they have been, but still off a very high base.
Is it infant formula, or the whole spectrum? What sort of ingredients and the like are we thinking?
Well, so our focus around the ingredient space is mainly around that sports and active lifestyles and the adult nutrition. We're not on the paediatric. I mean, we supply some paediatric ingredients, but we decided quite some time ago that we weren't going to focus on paediatrics. And our focus was, as I say, the sports and active lifestyles, the medical nutrition and the healthy aging. And so we see those as growth categories. as those populations, to the point you made, as those populations or birth rates start to decline, the population's moving into the I guess the middle-aged category, is that what we call it? And so, developing products to suit the lifestyles of those people.
What is the future, you think, for the dairy broadly for New Zealand, not just Fonterra? We were always known as a pretty hefty dairy producer. The world has changed. Where do you see things going? I mean, will we be known as we were previously as a dairy producer, or how do you see that changing with alternative milks, tariffs? Yeah, the world's a different place.
Well, the world is a different place, but I think what we've seen even in the last 2 or 3 years, and even go back through COVID, the importance the rural sector plays in New Zealand, the importance of the dairy sector that plays in New Zealand, I think will continue to play out well into the future, and we're seeing that play out now with pretty healthy pricing. Yeah. And so, while there's the tariff position you talk about, geopolitics in play, the rise of alternative products. Despite that, we're seeing the milk price, our forecast milk price this year, will be the highest that we'll ever pay. Yeah. And so the future is bright, and that's against a backdrop of, I think, a growing population globally, a rising middle class throughout some of those Asian economies that we refer to, which is, as I say, is our backyard. And people wanting to know where their product comes from and how it's farmed. And I think we have a unique proposition here in New Zealand where predominantly cows are outside, they're grazing on the pasture, they're taking advantage of the sun and the rain we get in this country, and that's something that I think is quite unique. Yeah, our point of difference. On a global scale, at scale. And that's the other point. There are always pasture farming systems around the world, but at scale, very few people can do that. And so when you sort of marry those things up together, it's a unique proposition that very few, if anyone, can do. And so that I think has a great future for the industry as a whole. We're
really good at producing milk products, if you like, but then it's, as you sort of said before, it's the secret sauce of what you do with those ingredients and the value add stuff. How good are we at extracting the science and the formulas, all that sort of thing? Is that something that, obviously Fonterra's pursued that, but in New Zealand, will that change, our focus from being a producer to someone who's got more value add in there?
I think there'll always be a combination of both, and there's a lot of new, I say new, but in the last sort of 5 to 10 years, a lot of new entrants to the dairy industry here in New Zealand through the deregulation of the industry back 20 odd years ago. And so, a lot of those people come in the early days and make commodities, and that would probably make sense to get a foothold. But as things evolve and you get stronger customer partnerships, that they play on the same position that we do around the pasture system, and put some effort and time and effort into things like innovation. I can see that continue to evolve in New Zealand, holding quite a strong position when it comes to innovative dairy products.
Let's look then at the new strategy and the ingredients business first. There's the food services, which I think is more restaurant around the world. Ingredients then, so what are we talking? How would you describe what that business does?
Yeah, so I referred to that ageing population, and you go to a country such as Japan, and their population is aging. I think that's well documented, and they're relatively well off by global standards. And so, consumers are looking for something that can make their life a healthier life. It goes longer. So of course they get out and they do a bit of exercise, and we see that in the Japanese population. But they complement that with also their diet, and so they also have a wonderful diet, around seafood and those sort of things. But they're starting to add things like additional protein into their diets, and that's exactly where we play. How can we support them by adding more protein, more calcium into their diet that they may not get by consuming the general products that they consume? And so, that for us is right in our wheelhouse around healthy aging, sports and active lifestyles. Then you get into the other end of the spectrum where people are consuming medical foods. They can't take anything through their mouth. They may have some issues with swallowing, or and so how do they ingest something that is good on the gut, but it gives them the high protein content that they need to sustain a longer life. And so developing products at a very high top of the pyramid, if you like. It's a niche area, but it's a growing area. Again, with aging populations, health issues globally, and you think about something like North America that have got a few health issues in certain areas, and we can come up with products to support them, working with those multinationals that have very strong relationships with maybe the medical or the hospital areas in North America. So that's certainly one area. And then at the commodity, and we'll always have some commodity products to support, underpinning a milk price that we need to pay our farmer shareholders. But, volatility, which didn't exist 15, 20 years ago in this industry, is here, and it's rife. I mean, prices will go up and down quite significantly. And so is there an opportunity for us to take advantage, if you like, of making some cash out of that volatility to support, again, our shareholders? So there's a financial play in that position as well. And then the last piece, when you talk about ingredients, is around how we make the products. And it's a truck goes on farm and collects the milk and drives down the road, dumps it at a factory. It goes in as white milk, and it turns up as a product anywhere along that spectrum. We believe there's some significant technologies that we can start to bring to a manufacturing process that both reduce costs but also think about new products that you may be able to develop. So all of that encompassing into what we believe is a strong ingredients proposition that really, I think we're just scratching the surface of it. If I look through the history, the potential is endless.
Yeah. Just thinking, we'll jump to food service in a moment, but just thinking about R&D, that's what it sounds a lot like, and as you say, there's lots of potential. Does that mean that the company would be spending more in that area, given what you're trying to achieve?
Yeah, we've ramped up our R&D spend quite significantly in the last few years, and so again, there's a spectrum of that. There's sort of the near term, how do we adapt a product that's been developed in Palmerston North at a research centre many years ago? How did that get adapted into to suit the palate or the consumer in, say, China or the consumer in South Korea? And so there's sort of short-term application work that we do, but then there's also what is that breakthrough technology? What is the next protein or amino acid that exists in milk that we haven't yet developed? And there's a lot of work that goes on in Palmerston North every day around our researchers that start to think about that, and so we'll continue to invest in that. And you referred before around fermented milks and some of these sort of things. We believe that'll play a part in the future.
Yeah.
Where in the spectrum of consumers is it going to be at the consumers of white milk end of putting on their cereal in the morning, or is it going to be those at the medical nutrition end? We probably think more towards the medical nutrition, and therefore how do we understand how that technology plays out? So we are investing heavily in those areas. In addition to, as I say, how do we make sure that the next pizza cheese, browns consistently and stretches consistently, things that a consumer just expects.
So food service then, as I understand it, that's more like restaurants around the world, and maybe cream, mozzarella. Tell me, is that the key things that they're after?
Predominantly, and so cream is sort of the hero product, if you like, in the Chinese market.
I heard there's 11 varieties of cream. Is that right?
Yeah, there are, and so maybe for you and I, you'd look at it and taste it, and they may seem the same, but the applications are different, and so you might use a cream to make a pasta sauce, or you might use a cream that goes on a sponge cake, and they are different creams. And then there are creams that go into tea and into coffees, which are scones, which are used differently. And so making sure you got the right product for the right application. Of course, if you think about a large bakery chain, for them it's around throughput. It's around usability of that product. It's around yield. If they make a cake, how do they ensure that the cake stays big, if that's the word, big in the cabinet, and doesn't sink over time, over a couple of hours? And so you're developing creams to support that. And China's been a wonderful market for us, probably in the last 7 or 8 years in the main, but it's doing very well. But how do we then replicate that throughout Southeast Asia? But we're playing at sort of the top of the pyramid. We're playing with consumers that have got a little bit of disposable income, mainly in that eastern seaboard. And so how do you make sure you can replicate that with consumers that may not have that cash? And so coming up with cheaper products, if you like, that can go maybe into sort of more rural or inland China, or into some of those Southeast Asian economies that haven't quite got the GDP per capita that China has in that top end. So again, it's evolving the products to suit Then of course you talk about our pizza cheese. Again, it's similar markets, the Western style diets that you see starting to emerge throughout Southeast Asia and into China. But again, why not into the United Kingdom again with our free trade agreement? And we've got very similar sort of taste profiles, the way that the British consumer consumes as we do, and so we think we've got something to offer there in that regard. So it's around just identifying your markets and identifying the categories in which you want to play.
So, Miles, if we think about where you're going with the consumer business, it's been well documented that it's possibly an IPO or a trade sale, and we're also talking consumer in Fonterra, Oceania and Sri Lanka businesses. Once that's all done and dusted, at the moment it's a bit market sensitive, so we can't go into the detail, but once that has happened, what sort of aspects are you thinking you'll divest that money into?
As you say, we're in the process, and the team are running fast on that process around the dual track now, but an IPO or a trade sale. Of course, the outcome of that will determine what the proceeds look like and what we do with it. But we set our strategy last year, reset our strategy last year, and focused on as we've talked about, the ingredients business and our food service business. Digitising or upgrading our operations facility. We also talked about sustainability. So there's some significant capital spend that is already pegged for those things. That aside, it'd be nice. I think there's some proceeds that are remaining, and the decision will have to be made. It's too early to talk about what that looks like yet. Yes. But we've also said, and we're required to seek a shareholder vote. At the point in time when we are at a stage of IPO or trade sale or something, a variant thereof, and at that point in time we'll have to give some indications to our shareholders around what those divestment proceeds may or may not do. So it's too early to talk about that in any detail, other than we do have a strong strategy now that's clearly focused on what we're going to be good at, or what we are good at, and what we're going to focus on going forward. That'll need some capital, as will our sustainability initiatives. But we'll talk to our farmer shareholders at that point in time.
Yeah, the sustainability is a big one, and it's taken a bit of a back seat with what's happening in the US and the like, but I think for Scope 3 and all the things, being a multinational, it's something obviously you've got to keep up with. I know that you've got the pilot farm in Taranaki, you're looking to get to net zero, but also I think you announced only a few days ago a sort of electrification program, 150 million I think it was. So we're talking trialling EV tankers, and we're talking about boilers that were coal going to electrode. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so you made a comment there that things are going on the back border with what's happening internationally, and while that may or may not be the case, these decisions for us are long term and take a long time to come to fruition. And so, the 150 odd million that we announced last week, they're going to take 3, 4, 5 years to really be fully implemented. By the time you procure, you can only pull a site down in the off season, all these sort of things. So if we were going to run a political cycle or run with the political sentiment of the day, we'd be going nowhere. We're actually got to get on with this stuff. But there's also another factor that's often missed through this, is there's a security supply piece in here. So sustainability certainly is a key driver and a key part of it, but security of supply. And what I mean by that is that we may run the risk of not having coal to put in our dryers and into our boilers at some point in time if there is no coal, because there's no resource consents to do it. Things like we've also seen the natural gas issues that we've seen in New Zealand in the last couple of years. I mean, it's been very tough to try and manage our business in the last year or two through that situation. So how do you try and reduce the risk or reliance on some of those other things that may not be on the ticket, or may not have been on the ticket to replace immediately? So we need to continue to focus on that, I think, irrespective. But again, we talk about Scope 1 and 2, which is predominantly our boilers and our EV fleet. Yeah. Sorry, our tanker fleet, which we are making some plays there. But the vast majority of our emissions as a cooperative are behind Farmgate. 90-odd percent, 91%, I think, are behind Farmgate, and predominantly it's methane. Methane, yeah. And so we've got a partnership there with the government, the AgriZero NZ partnership, and we've got to see that move at pace to move from ideas and concepts, businesses that they're investing in, and they've invested in a number of businesses already globally that are in the early startups phase. How do we move that into mitigants? How do we move that into adaptation and getting our shareholders to a point where they've got some tools they can use now or in the relatively near term to actually go about get on top of some of this methane issue. So that's where the focus on AgriZero NZ will be, and pleased with the progress that's making already.
Are we going fast enough though? It's a hard nut to crack, that's it.
It is a hard nut to crack, but I think we are, and the reason I say that is because you want to get this thing right, and you're playing with the biological system of a cow. You get ahead of yourself and start to cut corners and not do the things properly and do the trials correctly, and the implications on the animal, the implications on the milk, the implications on the land, the implications on the final consumer. All those things you really want to make sure you do properly, because you only get one chance at it. So I think we are doing it right. We could always go faster, but it's as I say, you need to weigh that against the risk of going too fast. So I'm pleased with the progress that the team are making, but 2030 is not that far away.
No.
Where there's the first stake in the ground. So I'm as I say, I'm pleased with where our farmers are at as well. They're becoming more efficient without some of those tools, and so I think we should also acknowledge that.
Yeah, and would it be that overseas someone might come up with something that would be helpful, or is it really we are focused here because we have the, probably the biggest output?
Well, methane is a global issue. Agricultural methane emissions is a global issue. We have a unique pasture system which we talked about before, and so some of the tools that are being developed have not been developed to support a farming system cows are outside, and so making sure that we can adapt if there are some technologies that are developed overseas for different farming systems. How can we adapt them to the New Zealand system? So that AgriZero are also tasked with doing that also, and so I see that as that is another way, hopefully, to solving the big issue.
Looking ahead, there's always challenges in business, as you've said. COVID, energy, geopolitical, whatever it might be. What do you see for 2025 anyway? The main challenges ahead for Fonterra?
I think the geopolitical landscape that we see ourselves in, we've been dealing with this, as I say, for a long, long time. But the situation that's playing out in Gaza, the situation that's been playing out in Ukraine, the elections that we've seen in North America, all these things, have seen more come to light, I guess, in a relatively short period of time. So making sure we're nimble enough for that, having a strong balance sheet to withstand any shocks that come our way, really strong customer partnerships. And so despite all these things that go on around us, people still need to eat, people still need to consume, and if things get hard, having the wrong relationships in place globally could set you back. But if you've got these partnerships, the customer partnerships that have been around for a long, long time, they will stand us in good stead, we believe, to get us through. And then, it sounds simple, but the diversification of our markets, is while there's some markets that we may struggle to deal with sometimes because it can be a little bit tough and getting cash out of them, or they may speak a different language, or whatever it may be, just having the boots on the ground to be able to deal with those markets and those customers, because at certain times you need them, and so that's important for us and something that's helped us to date.
In terms of investors, for Sharesies investors anyway, I probably should explain that there are the two types of Fonterra shares. There's the co-op shares, the FCG, I think it is, and then you've got the Fonterra shareholder fund with the FSF fund, which is probably what most Sharesies investors will be thinking about. Obviously, investors always look at the outlook and where a company is going. China obviously being talked about a lot. You've got the farm gate price, those sorts of things. The outlook, I think you gave some guidance back in December, and it would seem fairly, as you say, record highs for that farm gate price. Is there anything else that's helpful for investors to understand in terms of, where a company might be headed?
Look, it's no secret that we went through some pretty tough times. You go back to 2017, 18, 19, and we had to sort of do things differently, and we've talked a bit about that. And as a result, our share price took a hit, and probably rightly so. But hopefully in the last 2 or 3 years, we're showing our investors, we're showing our shareholders, we're showing the unit holders that we stand up and say we're going to do something, we get on and do it. We are delivering. Our performance has shown that we're delivering, and despite a record high milk price, earnings and the earnings per share guidance that we've got out there is also pretty good. We've increased our dividend policy, which also shows that there's a half decent yield there as well. So all those things hopefully give some confidence to the shareholder community that we're here for all our stakeholder groups, which includes farmers, unit holders. Clearly the New Zealand public have an interest in what we do, and Wellington obviously like to take a bit of interest from time to time. So we understand the role that we play, but hopefully the performance to date, the clarity of our strategy and where we're heading, gives that confidence that unit holders and shareholders have in their business.
So your March results are coming soon, and who knows, we can't expect too many surprises, but you're pretty confident that things are steady and tracking along. Yeah,
so that finished over the weekend. The end of January was the end of the half year.
Yes,
we were expected to come out in mid-March with what those results look like. And so, there's nothing to get away from our guidance that we've got out there at the moment of 40 to 60 cents and our milk price of $10 midpoint.
I think farmers are a bit happier now from all accounts. As as you say, you're sort of a public farmer. Everybody's got an interest in Fonterra kind of thing. I know with the partnership that Sharesies has with Fonterra, obviously now farmers can trade their shares on Sharesies and do it on their mobile and have a bit more going there. Have you had any feedback about how that's been going and a change for how to think about their business even?
Yeah, I mean, there's a broad spectrum when you got 8,000 or 9,000 shareholders.
Yeah.
There is a broad spectrum, and I suspect there'll be one or two farmers out there that still don't have a mobile device, but we'll put them aside for the moment. But the feedback I've had is that the simplicity of it, the visibility. I think the visibility without having to sort of get back at home at night and open their laptop or their PC, and so the visibility and the flexibility, I think, is something that they're enjoying. And so they've been asking for more of these things. Our shareholders have been asking for how do they become more mobile? How do they do two things at once? How do they walk around the farm? Because that's a lot of these farmers, they got into farming for a reason, for the lifestyle of actually getting out there being out there with their cows and being out there on the land. But how do they do that and actually keep in touch? And so the more we can come up with tools and ideas like this for them, the better. So well done to Sharesies for doing that.
Miles, we'll end it there, but I've got one last question for you. And you've been in the top job, if you like, for probably more than 5 years now. It's coming up 7, is that right? Close to
7 in August. Yeah.
You're obviously sticking around. You've got more to achieve, it does sound like. What excites you about the future?
Yeah, I mean, there are very few jobs, I think, in New Zealand that have the span that Fonterra does. And so, I'll go to a barbecue on the weekend and someone's got a view on Fonterra, and that's great. The role we play in rural New Zealand and the decisions that we make in this building or around the world every day have an impact on rural New Zealand. That's something that I'm quite excited about. And while it doesn't say we have a heck of a lot of influence in Wellington, a lot of the decisions we make also can have an outcome also from a political standpoint. So how do we try and influence some of the decision making for the right outcome for what we believe is New Zealand, but also from our farmer shareholders. So those things do excite me, and as I say, be 7 years come August, and I'm still here, I'm still enjoying it, and until my wife or my chairman tell me otherwise, I'll stick around.
Thanks, Miles. I really appreciate you giving us the time today. And thanks, everyone, for tuning in. You can listen to Shared Lunch on whatever podcast app you favour, and you can also see us on YouTube. Thanks for joining us, and leave us a rating and tell us what you'd like to hear next. Mā te wā.